Hey guys, it's Laura here again. Welcome to another video and let's get into it. Today's video is on Lee Miller, an American photographer and fashion model known for her portraits of Pablo Picasso. Despite being known as the lover of Man Ray, Miller's documentation of war-ravaged Europe after World War II made her reputation as a photographer in her own right. But had her son not discovered her exceptional work as a fashion and war correspondent, we would have only known her to be a muse and model. So why was her story lost for so many years? Why did it take her son to recover her reputation as an artist? Well, she was born Elizabeth Miller on April 23, 1907 in New York. Her first encounter with photography was her father, Theodore, an amateur photographer. He owned a Kodak Brownie and a stereoscope, had a home darkroom, and taught her the basics of the craft. She had a mostly pleasant and privileged childhood in an upper middle class and progressive household. Her youth was marred. However, when she was raped by the guest of a family friend when she was 7, scholars have frequently viewed her later photography through a lens tinted by this early trauma. Following the incident, her father began taking photographs of her and continued to do so into her 20s, in which she had her posed nude, images that seemed disturbing and inappropriate. Although she was forced to deal with the psychological and physical repercussions of these unfortunate incidents, Miller was extremely intelligent and bright and independent, qualities that opened up many opportunities for her throughout her life. Miller was not very sure what she wanted to pursue in her studies, so she initially studied lighting and set design, then briefly joined the experimental theatre at Vassar College and took dance lessons and performed in New York City. In 1926, at age 19, she left home for good and began modelling. That year, she literally stumbled into her professional modelling career when the major magazine publisher Condé Montreux's Nast prevented her from stepping into oncoming traffic. Impressed by her beauty, he hired her to model for Vogue, where Miller posed for notable fashion photographers Arnold Gantz, Nicholas Murray, and Edward Steichen. She was on the cover of American and British editions in March 1927. Steichen was also the one that encouraged her to take up photography seriously and provided her with a letter of introduction to Surrealist photographer Man Ray. Miller later moved to Paris, where she sought out Man Ray to study with him. In the next 3 years, she learned photography and became his lover. While in Paris, Miller also worked with French Vogue on both sides of the camera. Though she learned a great deal about photography, she owes more to Man Ray for her developing style. Adopting Ray's use of smaller cameras and relying on cropping to reveal the composition, she became known as a portraitist and fashion photographer, but her most enduring body of work is that of her surrealist images. While Miller was in Paris, she met many artists: Paul Eluard, Pablo Picasso, Max Ernst, Joan Miro, and photographed all of them. She also met Jean Cocteau, a surrealist artist and rival of Man Ray. He cast her in the leading role in his first film, Le Sang d'un Poète, 1930-32, The Blood of a Poet. Miller and Man Ray then split up, and she returned to New York City in 1932. In New York, she established a commercial and portrait photography studio with her brother Eric. Lee then married Aziz Elio Bey, an Egyptian businessman, after abandoning her studio in 1934. While living in Egypt, she became obsessed with the desert and sand. She photographed surrealist images that are very striking. After 2 years, she didn't want to live in Cairo and moved back to Paris and met Roland Penrose, British sculptor and surrealist painter. He soon became her second husband in 1937. As he was part of the surrealist world, she spent the rest of that summer with a group of artists: Penrose, Paul, Noush Elrod, Max Ernst, Leonora Carrington, Ray and his partner Adi Fedolin. enjoying a stream of hedonistic retreats. Though no doubt enjoyable, this period did little for the women's careers. Miller's reputation as an artist's muse was further strengthened by posing for Picasso, including portrait of Lee Miller as Laurs 1937. In 1939, they moved to London shortly before World War II broke out. During this time, she got on with a new career, photojournalism, and she defied orders from the US Embassy to return to America and took a job as a freelance photographer in Vogue. The next year, Miller photographed London during and after the Blitz, as the German wartime night raids on Britain's industrial centres came to be called, as a series that was published in Grim Glory, Pictures of Britain Under Fire, 1941. By 1943, Miller had become an accredited war correspondent for Vogue, and the following year she teamed up with life photojournalist David E. Sherman. Together, they followed the 83rd Infantry Division of the US Army as it advanced on the front lines. Miller became the first female photojournalist to do so. She photographed the liberation of Paris, the Battle of St. Malo, field hospitals in Normandy, and the liberation of both Dachau and Buchenwald concentration camps. Her photographs are some of the first photographic evidence of the Holocaust, where a horrifying glimpse of the atrocities committed by the Nazis in the camps. From Dachau, she and Sherman went to Hitler's private apartment in Munich. She had Sherman photograph her washing herself in Hitler's bathtub, her muddy boots on the bath mat. In 1945, Miller travelled throughout Eastern Europe to see and photograph the devastating aftermath of the war. After the war, Miller suffered from what now might be recognised as post-traumatic stress, drinking heavily and retreating into depression, both of which would occur throughout the rest of her life. She began winding down her practice as a professional photographer. She married Penrose in 1947 and they had a son that same year. Miller and Penrose frequently entertained art world luminaries at their home at Farley's house in Sussex, UK. Her final contribution to Vogue was in July of 1953, entitled Working Guests, featured of their illustrious visitors labouring around the farm, including Alfred J. Barr, director of the Museum of Modern Art in New York, feeding her pigs, and artist Max Ernst planting petunias. Miller died at home of cancer in 1977, and after her death, her son and his wife discovered some 60,000 negatives, 20,000 prints and contact sheets, documents and writings boxed up in the attic of the Farley farmhouse. From the 1980s, Anthony Penrose, who had known nothing of his mother's photography career, worked to archive and promote her work, which had been largely forgotten by the art world. Through his efforts, she became the subject of several exhibitions, biographies, and monographs. Today, her photographs are held in the collections at the J. Paul Getty Museum in Los Angeles, the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, and the Art Institute of Chicago, among others. Miller's unconventional career trajectory hindered her historical reputation. Her early association with Paris Surrealists, particularly her role as Man Ray's muse, frequently overshadows her own artistic accomplishments. Her abandonment of photography and the consignment of all her work to her own attic also limited her impact during her lifetime. But Lee truly blurred the boundaries between art photography and photojournalism, eventually reshaped the latter. Her photos for Vogue of London during the Blitz and the corresponding juxtaposition of commercialism and bloodshed created her own confrontational style that shocks still to this day. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you liked learning about this amazing woman's life. If there's any other artist or designer's life you want to learn more about, please leave it down in the comments below. I would really appreciate it if you would leave a like. Please subscribe and put your notifications on so you could be notified for when I next post. See you on the next one. Bye!